Former homicide detectives of Reddit. What was the case that made you leave the profession? I have a family friend who was a detective. He said one of the worst cases was that of a boy whose father had picked him up by the legs and slammed him against the wall. He said you could see the marks on the wall and that it haunts him to this day. The boy was like 8 and being starved. He took some food from his father and he got mad and raged. It's awful to hear. This one made my stomach churn. I don't understand how people can be so evil towards kids. Good night, y'all. I can't do this anymore. My dad worked homicide for 4 years while I was between 6 and 10 yo. He led an investigation where a set of parents let their 7 yo take a bath by himself as they usually did. And somehow the kid drowned. My dad had to carry the kid out and apparently he looked almost identical to me. My dad dropped his badge off at the station on the way home that night. First, I'm sorry your dad had to see that, but how the FCK? You can technically drown in a teaspoon of water if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that's true, especially children. My dad retired from the state police. Early on in his career he was a diver for them. Recovering drowned bodies. That sort of thing. One winter he had to recover the body of a snowmobiler whose sled had fallen through the ice. Brought the body up and the skin on the guy's knuckles was gone. Worn right to the bone. Why? Because when he went down he got disoriented and lost the hole in the ice. He'd worn his fingers bloody trying to claw his way through the ice. Dad said he put in for a transfer the next day. He was done with diving for bodies FFS. I have a persistent fear of finding a dead body in bodies of water. The thought of diving to deliberately look for them blows my mind. Such important work though. Mad respect. As a law enforcement recovery diver, it's not that bad. Where I work we can't see anything anyways. We just feel it and snatch it and bag it. My mom was a prosecutor in Cook County in the 90s. She worked nights and frequently went on ride-alongs with cops. She talks a lot about how numb you become to the violence. It felt totally normal to walk into Stronger Hospital and see gunshot victims in the hallways. Dying. Because they didn't have enough room or staff to treat them. Then she had kids and couldn't handle it anymore. Now she doesn't even like true crime. Undefined. My grandma used to visit us from Poland and stay for a few months. Every other year or so. She was visiting us when her kidneys started failing randomly and, since she wasn't a citizen and didn't have insurance, we had to take her to Strager. I've been to many hospitals over the years, but I have never seen that many people waiting and almost dying in the waiting room. It was probably the worst ER I have ever seen. Is Strager like a hospital chain? No, it's a government-funded public hospital, so it's where everyone without insurance goes. In 2009, my dad got laid off. We were friends with the chief of police in our town. And he put my dad through the police academy. My dad's first month on the job, a woman was killed in a hit and run. It was a small town, so this was big news at the time. Except the driver drove over her and it crushed her skull and her spine was sticking out. He almost passed out and quit a few months later when he got another job. When I was 7 I saw a man's skull getting crushed by a truck in India. I had nightmares for days. Crazy sound it makes. Cam still remember. Ever see that show Lieutenant Joe Kent, a homicide hunter? He was a really good homicide detective that solved like 400 murders. He said in an interview that he quit being a detective after a pedophile was arrested and trying to say the kid he molested came onto him. According to Joe Kenda, he beat the speep out of the guy and resigned and retired that day. Kenda has a new show on Discovery called American Detective. He tells other detective stories on it and it's great. I think you've just sealed my decision on getting Discovery. I knew I was getting it as soon as I found out he was getting another show. I got it the day it came out. It's only $5 per month with ads and $7 per month without. There's also a free week trial. So if it's something you don't want to pay for, I would just wait for the season to be done and then binge in a week. But it's completely worth it. The new show is a lot more nitty-gritty emo. A lot more real than anything else I've seen on ID, which are generally just victim stories being told in the same way and reenacted dramatically. There's less drama on this show and more just cold and shocking reality. They also specifically chose cases that got little attention and little coverage to feature. My aunt was a homicide detective. Had been for a few years. What did it for her was when she witnessed an autopsy of a baby. I think specifically when they had to cut the head open. Autopsies on kids are pretty much a weekly occurrence for anyone working investigations in any moderately sized city. Yeah, I understand, but she lives in Georgia, just outside Atlanta metro area. I don't guess it's as frequent. Gotcha. I've been a detective for around 8 years now. I probably attend 8 to 10 a year. Keep in mind every child death has to be investigated, to some that includes accidental as well as neglect/homicide. Not me. But my brother knows a lot of cops who ended up quitting after a few cases. Probably the two I remember him talking about the most that really messed with some of his cop friends and caused a couple of leave was. One walked in on a murder case where a man's brain had been beaten out his skull. It was so bad. Not only was her pronounced DOA, but there was brain matter and blood on the ceiling. To a mother begging my brother and his co-workers to promise that they'd find her daughter who went missing. My brother always says never to make a promise to a parent like that. Not only does it build them up to possible hit the ground harder, but it can also mess you up too that you wasn't able to keep that promise. They ended up finding her daughter's body, and when my brother and another cop went to deliver the news, he said it was really hard to keep a blank face while this mother proceeded to fall to her knees and have an emotional breakdown right there in front of them. After that, my brother refused to deliver any more news about a parent's dead child. I don't see that it would be bad to cry along with them. Probably be a lot less stressful for everyone. Actually. Totally agree. Breaking your heart in front of someone who is trying to look emotionless must be quite distressing. It seems like quite an old-fashioned rule. I get keeping things professional. But it must be hard for everyone to deal with it blankly. And doesn't seem the most healthy option. It should be okay for police to show that something upsetting has upset them. I learned about my brother's sudden death while with a friend. Your world is stopped in that moment. I vaguely remember my friend holding me stoically. But I was in such a state of grief/hysterics that no one else's presence even registered. Unfortunately, moments like those are the bottom. I don't think there's anything anyone could do to make it better or worse. It's been more than a decade since we lost my brother, and I became the strong one, always holding it together to get my parents/siblings through their moment. I never cry in front of them. I think stoicism is just some people's way of trying to help. Current detective of around 8 years now, with 14 in law enforcement as a whole. I've seen a lot I wished I hadn't, and many more that were unremarkable and not worth remembering. Kids are always the hardest and most unnatural. Heavy decomps are weird and pretty awful. But I think I speak for most anyone who is credibly answering this question. It's never one case. It's just the whole pile over many years. I liken it to rolling a d20. Every peeped up scene is roll for insanity. One day it's gonna come up a 1. Hey, if it does come up a 1, it's okay. Just call it what it is. PTSD is a real issue and help is very powerful. Don't forget you are loved and there are people with compassion. This will be the comment I go to bed with. Thanks. Who else clicked on this knowing full well they're about to read nightmare material before going to bed? Me exactly. The baby one is the worst one. There's like 7 baby ones. But I think I know which one you're talking about. The sad part is there are so many baby stories. The meth baby and rocking chair baby are the worst emo. Leave a like and a comment if you liked the video. Check out more Reddit related video. I am posting them daily. Subscribe to see more Reddit content.